Hello internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie, and in today's video I'm going to be building a few different things that you could put in a park or playground in your zoo to really help fill in the gaps in between habitats and stuff. Now I could easily go ahead and build some climbing frames as well, but for this video I am sticking to just a few things, and that is a swing set, a slide, a roundabout and a seesaw. If you would like to see a few more things made for playgrounds and stuff, let me know in the comments, because I'd be very interested in doing those in the future. Now, for those of you that have been watching this channel for a little while now, you will know that during our time in Floki Wildlife Park, we've been focusing mainly on building wonderful habitats for our glorious animals, and this is always great. It's the best thing to do in terms of our enjoyment. It's the fun thing to do, isn't it? Building habitats for these animals. But is it that realistic to only be focusing on the habitats? No, of course not. In zoos, there are always things to look at and things to do aside from just the animals. So normally I'm filling most of my gaps with a lot of plant life and stuff, making it look very natural and organic, as if though we're trying to limit how much we are disturbing the actual area that we are building in. But today I wanted to fill in this slightly larger gap with something a bit different, and that is going to be a playground for our guests, particularly children, to go and play in. Now obviously they can't actually play on these things, so we are just mimicking what we want these things to look like. We are literally just trying to make things look like the items that would be in a park. Unfortunately our guests won't be able to interact with them. And we are starting with the swings. As you can see, I am using the copper sunshade pole thingy from the New World theme, and this is going to act as the main legs to our swing set. What I'm doing is making sure the angle snap is on, setting it to 11.25 degrees, as I felt that this was a good kind of angle to have it at. Place it just kind of leaning to one side, and then I can duplicate it and make sure it lines up perfectly from the other side. Using the advanced move tools makes this kind of thing really simple and easy to do. So that would be what I suggest you do when you're trying to make things like this that need to be symmetrical. Really rely on your advanced move tools. Next, I'm using the New World banner post pieces that I'm just going to lay across the top, and this is going to act as the sort of head bar. I don't know what it's called, but obviously the bar at the top that the swings actually hang from. I'm just going to lay this across the top of the pair of legs that we created earlier, and most of these things that I'm going to be using in this video are from the base game. Quite a lot of them come from the New World theme, so you want to make sure that's researched. But I do also use some wooden pieces from the Twilight pack. But do not worry, if you don't have the DLCs, that is not a problem at all. These things are used in places where you can easily swap it out with stuff that's already in the base game. Mainly art pieces that match the same kind of shape and size. You can easily find a alternative to what I'm using here to make your own set. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that you should try to work smarter, not harder. So when you have got this perfect kind of set of legs here, all you need to do is copy and paste it across. There's no point trying to remake it from scratch again. Copy and pasting is a really good way of making sure that things are uniform and saving you a lot of time. Next up is to actually build these swings themselves, and I'm going to be using the Planet Zoo rope pieces. I'm going for the 2-meter ones just because the 4 meters were far too long. They would be basically touching the floor. Ideally, I need around 3 meters for the height that I've built this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this 2-meter rope piece, and then using the advanced move tools, I can move it exactly downwards, meaning that it'll kind of fit inside of itself, looking like it is just extended, and you won't really notice that it's 2 different pieces of rope. Once I'm happy with that, I just need to find an appropriate seat and place it at the bottom of this rope. Then I can copy and paste it along and actually create our swing seats. But before doing that, I did decide that maybe this swing set was a tad too narrow. So I just highlighted the end pieces and moved them across a little bit to extend the swing set in total. For the seat of the swing, I decided to use a Twilight door panel, the smallest option. I absolutely love these wood pieces. I think they are wonderful and easily some of the nicest bits of wood that we so far have in the game on console edition at least. Now, if you don't have this, it's not a problem. You could easily just choose one of the rectangular art pieces and use that instead for the seat. But I just wanted that little bit of texture. Now, without the context of there being any people here, it's kind of difficult to tell the height that this thing's going to need to be. So what I decided to do was go find a random staff member and then take our plank that we're using for the swing seat and drag it over to this wonderful looking mechanic who's clearly quite busy with his job, but I need him anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of bring this seat up to where his butt kind of is, and then we know that that would be an appropriate height to have this piece of wood. I can then take it back over to our swing set and adjust what we've already built accordingly. Then it's just a matter of copy and pasting over our completed swing, as I want 3 on this total apparatus thingy. So with that, our swing set is done and we can move on to the next thing, which is going to be a seesaw. Now, in a bit of contrast to the swing set, which was made up entirely of pretty raw looking materials, we're going to use quite a few art pieces to build the seesaw, as I want it to be a bit more colourful. Now, to begin with, we're going to build the base kind of section, and I'm going to do that by placing 2 circles that are slightly underground. You could just use semicircles, obviously, but I just decided to go this way. And then I'm going to place a triangle in between them, as that is the point that the seesaw will actually rest on and pivot on top of. To make the main board that our children can then sit on to actually use the seesaw, I'm going to use the individual planks from the Twilight door pieces. Again, I really like these wood pieces, so that's what I'm going for. I'm going to make it 3 pieces wide and then just duplicate it to make it a little bit longer. I think it's a good idea to try and get the platform made before we then adjust the angle of it. So I'm duplicating it 3 times because I think that's a fairly decent length. Then I can position it right on top of the base that we've made for our seesaw and adjust the angle using the advanced move tools. And to make sure that our guests aren't destroying their bottoms when they slam into the floor, we're going to place a couple tyres partially dug underground so that when the seesaw goes down one end, has a slightly softer landing, something to bounce off rather than just hitting the ground. In order to create the handlebars for this thing, the piece that the guests are actually going to hang on to when they're sitting on it, otherwise they just fling off into the distance. I'm just using some painted rods. I'm making them blue to kind of match the base piece. I should have done this before angling the main piece of wood, because getting these at the right angle was fairly annoying, a bit finicky. So a tip for you guys, add the handlebars before you then move it onto the base of the seesaw. It will just make things a lot easier for you. Next up is a roundabout, and that again is going to be quite a bright and colourful thing in this playground. And it's a really simple build as well. This is much simpler than the previous 2. All we need is a large circular piece that will act as the base of the roundabout. We want it to be slightly off the ground because otherwise it would just be dragging on the floor. You obviously need that little gap between the base of the roundabout and the floor in order for it to turn around without any friction. I'm then going to use a cylinder piece, these are all art pieces by the way, and just sink that right into the middle of the circle. It takes a little bit of time to just line it up correctly, but once it's done, you don't need to do it again, so nice and easy. We're going to sink that partially into the ground and have it sticking out the top as well, and from there we can add our bars. Now there are a few options of what we could be using, but what I found was the bars that we used at the top of our swing set, there is an identical smaller piece that is just like that. So we're going to use that because the kind of L-shapedness of it, the bit that juts off at the end, can go right in the center of our roundabout, which just looks like a natural fixture point, which is excellent. From there, using the advanced move tools and making sure your angle snap is on, you can get the symmetry of this to look really good, and just have them evenly spaced out around the roundabout. Then to help connect these larger bars to the base of the roundabout, I use some New World fence posts, and I really like how these things look. They've got a disc on one end which will act really nicely as kind of a fixture point to the base of the roundabout. And as a bit of extra decoration for this roundabout, I decided to use these New World sign cap prints, which are basically just paw prints, and I made it a nice dark green to contrast against the bright yellow and sunk it slightly into the base of the roundabout just to add some like decoration. But also, it does have a bit of a logical reason as well. If you were on a roundabout and it was spinning at high speeds, having varying textures on the base of it would allow you to grip to it a little bit better, meaning that the children on this are a little bit more secure and won't just be flung off into the distance if it goes too fast. Now, before we get onto the slide, I did also decide to use some large logs and sink them into the ground, making kind of a trim trail, hopscotchy log kind of area thingy. Just kind of an obstacle course for kids to jump across, basically. Really easy to do. You can kind of just use the climbing frames for the animals, actually. I'm fairly sure kids would enjoy that. But yeah, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you want to see a few more actual climbing frames and stuff, some more things for a park, let me know in the comments, because I'd be more than happy to do that. So the last item that we are making for the playground is the slide. It's a bit of a classic, and I wasn't going to include it initially, but it just felt wrong not to. So that's why I'm building it out of the way, because the park is actually complete at this point, but I wanted to make this separately and then just move it over. So what I'm doing is I'm using some rectangular art pieces. They're just from the Planet Zoo theme. The base game, as the rest of it kind of has been, aside from the wooden planks. What we're going to do is create kind of a flat section at the bottom of the slide using these rectangular pieces, and then using the exact same ones, we're going to start to angle them and shift upwards a little bit. Try and create a curve by moving these pieces and angling them at the same time until we get to an angle that we're happy with, and then we can just make a straight line from there to get to the top of the slide. And then once we do make it to the top of the slide, all we need to do is make sure that the slide itself actually levels out a little bit, because the kids obviously need to be able to sit on something before sliding down. And with the basic shape of the slide in place, it's time to actually make it be a functioning thing rather than just a floating curve. So what I'm using is some of the European theme marquee beams. So make sure that you've done your European research if you're playing in franchise mode. And you can just pop these on the four corners of the square that we've created at the top. Again, I'm going to be copying and pasting stuff. So I'm just using the first two and then copying and pasting them across. At this point, we're also going to change the angle of one of them to create a supporting piece for the steps. This is going to act as the main beam that the steps are then going to be attached to. We are also going to be using a couple of the 1 meter pieces of the marquee beams. And the primary reason for that is we're going to use them to kind of create handles at the top of the slide so that the children don't just fall off to the side, because that would be very unfortunate. We don't want any lawsuits, do we? So we're just going to position this across the top of the kind of legs that we've already placed. And we're also going to use this at the bottom of the slide as a supporting piece to make sure that the bottom of the slide isn't just levitating, but is instead actually anchored to the ground. And for the steps of this slide, I am using the exact same pieces that we used to create the seats on our swings, and that is the Twilight door panel, the smallest piece. And I'm just spacing these out quite evenly up the two supporting beams that we placed earlier to create some steps. Now, I was almost ready to call this slide done, but in the interest of safety, I decided to kind of create a lip on either side of the slide so that the children aren't quite as likely to just fall off the side of it as they're going down. So I'm using the exact same pieces that we used to actually build the main body of the slide, but instead we're going to have them facing the opposite way. Where they were kind of horizontal, they're now going to be vertical-ish. We're going to put them at an angle to create kind of a funnel sort of shape going down the slide. We're just going to do this up the length of it and then kind of angle it a little bit at the bottom just before we get to that straight piece where the children can then exit the slide. Now, back over at the main park, in order to make sure our guests can actually walk across it, we're going to need to lay down some paths. And to do that, I'm going to be building to the grid. You activate this by pushing in on your right stick and selecting an available grid for you to use. I'm going to be using the tree bark path because this is often used as a ground covering in playgrounds and stuff, as it's nice. It's like nice and soft for kids to accidentally fall on if that does happen. I'm then just going to link it up to the main path, and there's the slight issue of why would anybody actually come here? There's nothing there for guests to interact with. This is all decoration at this point. So to remedy that, I'm going to be placing an ice cream truck. Now, all I'm doing for this is I'm using one of the European food trucks and I'm placing it in the top right corner of our playground. then I can select just the counter piece for my chosen food or drink shop, and I believe I go for the Slurpee counter, the kind of like slush puppies, gulpy version obviously, and then you can sync it into this food truck and it'll automatically connect to the path if it's close enough to one. And now that our guests have a reason to come to this playground, and it's not just full of decorations, but it actually has something for them to do, I am going to kind of blend this area into the surrounding bit of the zoo. And to do that, I am just going to be using plants from this zoo's natural biome, which is the temperate biome in Europe. So those are the filters that I'm going to use, whilst I just plaster this area with some plant life. So with all of those plants added and our slide actually put in, this park is done. If you would like to download these pieces for your own zoo, they are now available on the console workshop. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more Planet Zoo videos just like this in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.